Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar. So sorry for the very slight late start, and I hope everyone's doing well tonight. This is the second in the restarted sequence of the Ely Darson Association events, and we're very pleased to welcome Matt Susie to talk about recording bell ringing tonight. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. It's only the cameras on mine and Matt's computers that are going to be active, and also the microphones will only be on our computer, so we can't see or hear anything that we're doing, which please do feel free to make yourself comfortable and get yourself a drink to accompany the webinar. Matt is expecting to talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll be having any questions and answers at the end of that time. Please do use the Q&A feature, which you can find by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom application. Please also use the chat, which I can see some people have already found, to sort of make any other comments. You can send messages to all of the people in attendance via the chat interface. And if there's any technical problems, please also feel free to let me know through there. So I'm going to invite Matt to come on screen. I'm very privileged to have worked with Matt to help broadcast the 12 bell contest that hopefully several people have seen in previous years. I think people will be aware that it's been increasing in its complexity and reach over the years, and I think it's fair to say that Matt has been a big part of that as well. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Matt. Good evening.
Hiya, yeah, thanks. I should share my screen. Oh, where's the button? There it is. And oh, technical difficulties. There we go. Does that work, Dave?
Yeah, that's good. I can see that now.
Cool, excellent. Right. So, hello everyone. I'm Matt, and I'm going to be talking to you about recording bell ringing. So, yeah. So, who am I? Well, that's a picture of me. I'm an electronics engineer. I'm a bell ringer, and I guess for this sort of thing, I'm most importantly part of the 12 bell tech team. My job on the tech team primarily is video stuff. Gareth and Matthew Tosh do all the audio and the production parts, and I am responsible for everything you see, along with a lot of the other setup related things. But I am by no means an expert. These are just the things I'm going to be talking about are the things that I have found that work. When you try it for yourself, you might find that things are different, and you might find better solutions. So, my word is not law when it comes to this. So recording bell ringing, why would you want to do it? I think is the first question. And I think these sort of the four things that I think are the most important reasons why you might want to do it. Publicity is the big one. That's why we do the 12 bell broadcast. It means that ringers and non-ringers can get involved from afar. And this could also be in your own buildings. If you have an event, you could have a live stream or some sort of live relay, video or audio thing. So people outside of the tower can actually see what's going on. And of course, you're never really in the belfry, so it's or never really in the belfry when the bells are ringing, I should say. So it's going to be also quite good to see that. Prosperity, recording particularly interesting or historic pieces of ringing. Again, this is sort of another reason we do the 12 bell stuff, so we can watch it back in the future, and there's that, it's then recorded for people to see. Personal interest and enjoyment, some of us do it because we quite like playing with tech, and we quite like the challenge that it presents. It's an interesting beast trying to record bells, because there's so many different ways you can come at it. And finally, band improvement and teaching. I think band improvements, that's sort of more focusing on the audio side. You might want to record bells so you can listen back to pieces of ringing you've done, and try and use that to improve. And teaching, I think having sort of a video feed that allows people to see what's going on in the belfry and going on in the towers can be a very useful teaching tool as well. So types of sort of recording and video. Well, we've got the two main differences is you've got recorded video and audio, which is stuff that you might want to distribute later. So this is videos that you've taken or audio clips that you've recorded where you might send them to people later on or upload them to YouTube. But the point is, it's not live. It's something you've done and then you distribute it. It's pre-recorded. And on the other hand, you've got live video and streaming. So the live relay is when you might have a TV in your ringing chamber, which shows you the bells moving, or a TV at the bottom in your church building, which shows the bells or the ringers, either or. And streaming is when you then connect all that live stuff up to a platform like YouTube, so you can view it live, a bit like what we're doing today. I know this is a live webinar, it's not pre-recorded. So recording video, sort of these are sort of the main points before I start delving into the actual hardware and how you might go about it. These are sort of the main things that come to mind when you think, well, what do I need to do to record video? The first thing you're going to need is a camera. Most people have got cameras on their phones these days. They're actually very good. But I'll talk about camera selection a bit later on. I'll put wide angle lenses here. Towers are really small, and being able to get the whole picture can be quite a challenge sometimes. You'll find if you ever try to take a picture in a belfry with your phone, you have to stand right in the corner with sort of the phone right up against your forehead to try and get anything in. So if you've got wide angle lenses, that does help massively. Frame rate. So the standard frame rates you get with TV and video cameras tend to be about 25 or 30 FPS. And this is fine. This is sort of the industry standard. 60 FPS can look quite nice because you get a smoother motion. Bells turn quite quickly, but it's not a critical point. But the most important point is good lighting. If you've got no lights in your belfry, you won't be able to see anything, and neither will the camera. It's going to be a bad day. You're not going to get anywhere. But if you can get some good lighting in your belfry, this will make a huge difference. Most belfries I've been in have been very poorly lit, and yeah. So live streaming and relay, the sort of thing that would spring to mind for me at least is grab yourself a CCTV system. Comes with all the cameras, comes with all the wires, just plug it into a TV and off you go. Lots of churches and towers use these. I've seen them used all over the place. I've seen completely ancient systems buried in the corner of some tower collecting dust. We've all seen them. But they do work, and they're cheap and easy to use, and that's why people use them. You can use a camcorder for live stuff, and with HDMI outputs these days. Again, it's all very simple stuff to connect up. If you sort of have I guess if you've got a plan of what you want to do, it's reasonably easy to get the hardware to do that. And again, phones. So CCTV and camcorders, that's sort of more talking about live relay. Live streaming is sort of the next step. It's a bit trickier. but you can live stream directly from your phone. So say you wanted to just very quickly, you were stood outside of a tower and at a striking competition, you wanted to live stream some of the ringing, you can just do it from your phone. There's no need to complicate it. You can just stand there, hold your phone up, go straight live to YouTube, and that is fine. That will do the job, as we say. So I'm sort of going to talk now in slightly more detail about what kit you might actually want to use. What do you actually need to make this work? So camera choice. This is the big question everyone wants to know. What camera do I need to record bells? Well, that is such a big question, and we could probably do another entire presentation just on camera choice. And in fact, all the points I'm going to cover now, you could look at them in such depth. This is really just skimming the surface. This is a big subject. But the first thing, like I mentioned before, your phone camera. Cameras on phones are really, really good these days. And they are getting better. And you've probably noticed that modern smartphones have got sort of 3 or 4 cameras in some cases. And some of those lenses are in fact wide angle, like I mentioned earlier. Towers are quite small. So you might find that your phone camera is actually good enough for just doing a video of bells. My recommendation would be just give it a go, try it, see what happens. It might work, it might not. But if you've got one, you might as well give it a go. But then you've got video cameras and camcorders. These are obviously specifically designed for this job. They're designed, their one purpose in life is to record things, is to video things. And action cams, these are like GoPro things. They're really, really small, got wide angle lenses, and they can also be really good for recording bells. Because they're so small, you can stick them in a corner somewhere. They're completely waterproof, so you don't have to worry about damp church towers and whatever. And they're very durable, so if you drop them, it's not a problem. They're also really, really cheap at the moment, so that could be another avenue to pursue. And finally, DSLRs. These are primarily picture cameras, but most of the modern ones have video features. I've used DSLRs in the past to film bells, and they work great. The big advantage is they often have interchangeable lenses, so you can find a lens that is appropriate for the size of belfry you're in. So you sort of think, I think the question now is, but why would I want to change? Why would I need to use anything better than my phone? I've got a little comparison here. This is Gloucester Cathedral. I filmed this probably 4 years ago now, and the little laser pointer out. The top image here is filmed on my phone, and this bottom image is filmed on my DSLR. Now, these are exactly the same events, and in fact, I'm stood in the same position. And to my eye, at least, the DSLR one looks quite a bit better than the phone one. But the phone one is all right. It shows bells moving, and if that's the goal, then that's fine. But it's not necessarily the best that you can get. So just to sort of compare them a bit quickly, a little bit, the biggest thing you'll notice is the angle of the lens, how wide angle the phone isn't in this case. So if I'm standing in exactly the same spot in these two images, and you can see that the phone just about gets, well, it doesn't even get all the bell frame in on this left-hand side, but my DSLR with its big wide-angle lens gets the whole bell frame in no trouble at all. The other thing is the dynamic range. So dynamic range on video cameras and photo cameras describes the difference between light and dark. And if you look here below the frame, you'll see that it's very dark and you can't really see anything on the phone camera. But on the DSLR, you can see what's going on under here. And that's because DSLR has better dynamic range. It's better at seeing the darkest bits, and it's better at processing the lightest bits as well. Belfries are full of dark and light bits. So I would suggest that the mechanism that affects dynamic range actually is the size of the sensor. Phones have very, very small sensors, and video cameras tend to have bigger sensors. So they're going to be naturally better at, or naturally have a better dynamic range. The final point is stability and mounting it to a tripod. This camera is mounted to a tripod, and my phone is just held in my hands. And you can see them sort of wobbling all over the place. And this is one that is nice and smooth. So talking about the dynamic range and lighting brings me on to my next topic, which is lighting. Belfries tend to be pretty gloomy places. If you've ever worked on bells, you'll know that you really can never see what you're doing, and you're forever balancing torches underneath things and on top of things to try and see around. Now, some belfries are extraordinarily well lit, but I think they are in the minority. So you're probably going to have to add lighting to your belfry. You're probably going to have to artificially illuminate. Well, I guess it's all artificially illuminated, but you're going to have to add your own lighting to improve your video. So how can you go about that? Well, the first thing you might think of is, well, can I just use a standard halogen work light type of thing? The ones with sort of like the grills on the front that you can just mount on anything, hang from the ceiling or put on a shelf or something like that. And yeah, you can use those. They work great. They're cheap, they're easy to come by. The only thing you do have to be aware of is you need to power them. You've got to run power into your belfry. Some you might already have power up there, a lot don't. But that's not too much of an issue, just running an extension cord up your spiral staircase. And they work pretty well. The other thing you can try is fluorescence. Now, these can cause issues. Like the fluorescent tubes, the strips you can get, like in office and things, they can cause flicker on video, and it sort of looks a bit like a zebra. It's sort of white and dark stripes, and you'll tend to find that they sort of propagate either up or down, just depending on the frame rate of your camera. You really don't want to have that. You might find that if you already have fluorescent tubes in your tower, that you might have to use other forms of lighting. Now, having said that, fluorescents can be great and you can use them, but you've got to have ones that have got a thing known as a high frequency ballast, which changes the sort of the rate at which the light flickers to a frequency which is much greater than the frame rate of your camera, so that the two don't interfere. But my recommendation would be just to try it and see what happens. We've used fluorescent tubes to light belfries when doing the 12 bell in Exeter, in fact. LEDs, now these can be really good. You can get little portable LED work lights. Again, they're very cheap, and most importantly, they're battery powered. They're rechargeable, so you can take them with you wherever you need to film. You can throw them into a belfry. You can stick them in corners all over the place, and there's no wires, no hassle. And then when you're done, you can turn them all off, take them with you, recharge them for the next event. I think these are probably the easiest solution, because you don't have to run extension cords and worry about power. And the final point with lighting is positioning. Where do you put your lights? Most lights in belfries are going to be on the ceiling, because that's normally where you put lights. But if you're putting your own lights in, you might not be able to hang them from the ceiling. The thing you want to avoid is, don't point the lights at the camera, because it'll be like sort of like being dazzled by car headlights. You won't be able to see much. You want to make sure that they're behind the camera, facing the bells. They don't necessarily have to be directly behind the camera, but sort of on behind the camera mostly, I think is the best way to describe that. And talking about the fluorescent tubes, here's a picture of the belfry at Exeter. And in fact, this is the lighting setup we used for the 12 bell competition last year. And these are fluorescent light boxes. It's a light box because it's got this box around the light, and what this does is it diffuses the light. It makes it prevents you getting hard shadows, which, because bells have lots of sort of frame bits, and there's lots of little bits that can cast shadows. If you've got a light box, it softens all of that, and it does make it much easier to film. So I'd say a light box is probably the ultimate way to illuminate a belfry, but they are a bit more expensive and they're quite big. So if you're space constrained, then you probably don't want to go down that avenue. So next point, when you're trying to video your bells, is where do you put your camera? Well, high up in a corner is usually your best bet. The further away you can get, the more bells you're going to be able to see. And high up looks quite good, I think. Most bell frames are low side bell frames, which is to say half the bell sticks out above the frame. And if you're above the frame, it means you can see everything that's going on. The other reason you want to go high up is because bells swing. And if you're quite low down, you might find that one bell swings in front of your camera and blocks the view half the time. It's another point. You'll usually be rigging cameras with the bells down for safety. Remember, when the bell is swinging, you've got to think, okay, is it going to swing through the field of vision of the camera? Is it going to get in the way? Am I going to, when I ring this bell up, am I just going to be able to see? Am I not going to be able to see anything? You do have to think about that when I'm setting it all up. And then finally, mounting the camera. You can mount it to pretty much anything. You can make a custom bracket if you wanted and mount it to some steel beams in your ceiling. Or you could just stick a tripod on the floor. Or you could do what I've done often, which is to use a GorillaPod. This is a GorillaPod. It's a tripod with bendy legs, and you can stick it onto anything pretty much. These are really good in belfries. There's usually something to grip onto. Not usually a tree trunk, but some sort of part of a wall or stairs or ladders. In fact, you can wrap your tripod around it, and that sorts your mounting issue out. So we talked about what you might need to video your bells. Now let's talk about recording the audio. So you may not want to actually record video. You may just want to have audio, and that's fine. But if you're doing video, you're always going to need audio anyway, so you're going to have to sort out your audio at some point. The big thing about recording bells is that they're really loud. Bells are loud. How loud, in fact? Well, here's a decibel scale. Sound intensity is measured in decibels. And I found a paper that suggested that Big Ben, in fact, is allegedly 118 dB, which is quite a lot. And remember, that's at the source of the sound. That's at where that's at the mouth of the bell. And you can see here that a trombone is 110 dB. Now remember, that's in the bell of the trombone. You never normally that close to it, so they are pretty loud, these bells. So the first thing is mic selection. What microphone do you need? And again, this is something that you could have a completely separate presentation on. You could dig into this so deep, it's unbelievable. But usually the best bet is to get one of these handheld audio recorders, like the Zoom type recorders. You've got two little microphones on top, and a big record button. those work great for bells. They're pretty cheap and they're battery powered and you can stick them anywhere. Or you could go down the route of having hardwired microphones and a separate recorder, which is outside of the belfry or wherever you're going to record the bells. That's completely up to you. The handheld recorders are pretty good, and it's definitely a good place to start if you don't have any kit. Next thing is placement. Now you don't have to record bells in the belfry. You might find that sound mixing becomes an issue. If you're just recording one bell, then you might as well stick the microphone next to the bell. But if you're recording multiple, which you're likely to be doing, you can end up with sound mixing issues. Now, what I mean by this is if you stand in the corner of a tower and the bells that are closest to you are going to be more intense and louder than the ones at the other corner of the tower. Now, microphones observe this as well. If you stick a microphone right next to your tenor, you're just going to hear the tenor. You're not going to hear anything else, or you will, but it'll be it'll be quiet in comparison. So you sort of need to think, well, can I put my microphone somewhere where perhaps the audio is going to mix a bit better? And that might not actually be in the belfry. That could be in the floor below. It could be in the ringing chamber. It could be outside. I don't know. The only way to find out is to try. Stick your microphone in all sorts of places around the building and see what works. The quickest way to do that is just to walk around yourself when the bells are ringing, stand in the different chambers, listen, and perhaps it's a good start to trying to find the optimum location to record the bells. But usually, if you can get into the tower, if you can get into the belfry and dangle the microphone way above the bells, that's usually a good starting point. Auto gain control. This is a quick point. Lots of these handheld recorders, they have automatic gain control, and what that means is you can use these recorders to record everything from human voice at speech level to bells at, police siren level. The electronics inside has this auto gain control, which changes how sensitive the microphone is depending on how loud the thing is you're trying to record. Because bells are so loud, my recommendation would be to turn this off if you can and try and set the gain manually. You'll probably find that the gain needs to be as low as it can go, or at least that'll be a good place to start. You might have to turn it up a little bit, particularly if you're outside of the belfry. If you're outside, you'll probably need to have it turned up quite a way. That's just a point to consider. Onboard microphones. What do I mean by this? Well, most cameras have microphones built in. Your phone has a microphone built in. If you record video on your phone, you don't think about having to manually record audio next to it. It just does it for you. Most cameras have onboard microphones. So you think, can I just use that? Well, sometimes. Sometimes you can use them, sometimes you can't. I've had very variable experience. One of my cameras has a good onboard microphone that works very well for bells, and the other one is completely terrible and is unusable with bells because they're so loud. So that's definitely a give it a go. But if you're not using an onboard microphone, you're going to have to think about externally syncing your audio. If you've got a handheld recorder and a video camera, you've got to at some point stick the audio and the video back together. A good trick is when they're doing films, when they're actually, so I should say, when they're making like movies, they have those like clapper boards, and that's what they use to sync the audio up. We don't need clapper boards because we have clappers on bells. So you can visually see, right, the bell has struck at this point, and then you can hear on the audio file when that bell has struck. And it's a simple matter of just lining the two up, and you should be good to go. So syncing the audio to the video is not as hard as you might think. That is assuming you can see a clapper. If you can't see a clapper, then it is quite tricky. So my next point is live streaming. So we've now got perhaps a video camera and an audio source, which is fine if you just wanted to do a recording. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if you just want to do a static recording, then you can just get yourself a camera and a microphone and off you go. If you want to do live streaming, that's has a slight bit of complication to it. You're going to need to, at some point, live mix the audio and video back together, and then you're going to have to encode that, which is this is a term we use for converting the live video data into something that a live stream provider can understand. Live stream providers, a good example is YouTube. You can send live video to YouTube, and there has to be an encoding process that happens to take your video and stick it to YouTube. There's two main ways to go about this. You've got hardware vision mixers and encoders, and software vision mixers and encoders. This is a sort of a big debate as to which one you might want to use. On one side, you've got software vision mixers and encoders, such as OBS, which is freely available. And this is why they're so appealing. They are free. And if you're doing simple stuff, if you've just got one video camera and one microphone, maybe two cameras, you'll probably be absolutely fine. But they do tend to fall over a bit when you start to ask too much of them. If you've got 5 or 6 cameras and 3 or 4 microphones and you're wanting to do live graphics as well, you may find that the software just crashes. And that's not a fun day. Trust me, it's happened before. So a more reliable way to do this is to use hardware and vision mixers and encoders. These can be quite expensive, and it's probably not the thing you want to jump straight into. But this is the type of stuff we use for 12 bell. So that leads me on nicely to the 12 bell setup. I thought I might talk about this a little bit. Some of you may be interested to know some of the more technical details about how we actually did it. And also it's a good example of a setup, of a complete setup. We know it works, the stream went well. So this is some of the kit we used. So we had 3 mics in the Belfry, 4 mics in the studio, and 2 radio mics. The studio mics were just for Matthew Tosh and the guests. The radio mics, we had 1 system in the Cathedral at Exeter, and we had 1 in the Beer Garden. Now, we had 3 mics in the Belfry. 1 was for the judges. That was an independent feed that went to the judges. We also had access to that, but we didn't use it for the live feed. We used a pair of microphones, and here they are. These are the 2 microphones we used to record the bells for the live stream. Now you might ask, why did we use 2? Now, this is a good topic. We broadcasted the bells in stereo this year and the previous year in Cambridge. In fact, they were both in stereo. Stereo bells sound good. As human beings, we have 2 ears. We gain a lot of positional information from where a sound is coming from, and it's nice to sort of mimic that when you're listening to bells. So we used 2 microphones. We had 1 pointing up, 1 pointing down, which just gave a nice stereo effect. But it worked well, and yeah. So these microphones were dangled from their wires in the very, very top of the Belfry in Exeter, and this is a perspective. So I'm sort of sat in the roof beams where the microphones are. These are the bells, and that's Dave, who was there helping me poor cables all over Exeter at the time. From the video side of point of view, we had 6 cameras. 4 of them were in the studio, 1 was in the cathedral, and 1 was in the belfry. Now the cameras we used were for the belfry were these Blackmagic Design micro studio cameras. These are really tiny cameras, and you stick they've got interchangeable lenses, so you can put on a very nice wide angle lens. In fact, I think we used an 8mm fisheye lens, although David might correct me later. These cameras have HDMI outputs, and you can connect that to your mixer. Now, this is sort of another topic altogether, but HDMI as a signal doesn't travel very far. I think you can get about 3 meters out of it, maybe 5 quite safely. The run from the belfry to the studio was at least 100 meters. So HDMI cable isn't going to do that. So we used a signal and protocol called SDI, and that uses a coaxial cable. And to convert into that, we used these little microconverters. I then ran the coax cable all the way to the studio and decoded it there. The belfry camera I mounted high up in Exeter, and what I should have used is my GorillaPod to mount it, the thing I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, I forgot it. So the image I'm about to show you next is not how you should do it, but this is how I ended up mounting the camera in the belfry in Exeter. It's fair to say, don't try that at home. It's not a good way to mount a camera, but it worked. And if it works, it's not stupid. Although in this case, I do think it does look a little bit silly. But this is the camera with its wide-angle lens. Under here is the micro converter, and then all the wires are coming down here, including power and the video feed. So putting it all together, the last piece of the puzzle is the vision mixer and the encoder. We used an A10 mixer from Blackmagic Design and a video unit from Teradek. These are what they look like. This vision mixer you can remote control from a laptop, which makes it quite a lot easier to use because these buttons are quite small. It's got all these inputs, it's got some outputs. You stick your cameras in here, you put your audio in here, all the electronics magic happens inside. You take a HDMI output, which is the final output, you stick that into your video unit, and this is the magic encoder that takes our live feed, it takes in some internet, and it just streams it to YouTube as if by magic, and it most of the time just works. This is a quick, in fact, this is the block diagram I used for setting up the 12 bell setup. We had 2 vision mixers. These are these big green boxes. Audio came in here, and all these blue circles are camera inputs into the mixer, and a laptop. This laptop was what created all the graphics and like the clock and the banners and things like that on top and bottom of the screen. And it went out to video, then out to YouTube finally. Last picture. This is the mess of cable post Exeter winning the competition. We had a lot of cable that year. I think it was something like 1,500 meters we laid in total, which is a record, which I don't really want to break, but may end up happening. So to wrap it all up, the most important points, I think, about videoing and recording, audio video in your belfry. Number 1, good lighting. I think that will make or break any setup. Number 2, wide angle. If you've got a very narrow angle lens, you're not going to be able to see a lot. A nice wide angle lens will allow you to see what's going on. You can get all the bells in, which is ultimately what you're trying to do. A decent microphone. You might find that your built-in microphone on your camera does just fine. I found that on one of my cameras, but like I said, on the other one, it's terrible. So you can use one of these handheld recorders, which do work really well. And the final point is just give it a go. You've probably all got some sort of kit, whether it be just your smartphone or some old video camera lying around, or like a GoPro or something. Stick it in a tower, see what happens. You might get really good results first time, you might not. If you don't, that's when you start going through the checklist. You think, well, do I have good lighting? Okay, all right, I need to improve my lighting setup. Do I have a wide enough angle lens? No, okay, right, perhaps I need to use a different camera. What's the audio like? Oh, the audio, the bells are too loud. Like, you can't hear anything. It all just sounds like a mess. So I might use a different microphone, or I might try different placements and moving things around. You have to give this stuff a go. A lot of it is just trial and error and experience. Put cameras and microphones in belfries and see what happens. That is my take-home point. I think that is all I have to say. Hopefully I haven't rambled on for too long. If Dave wants to come back. Dave there? Oh, there he is. Hello.
I am. Sorry, I was having a bit of my own technology fail just for a moment. Wonderful.
Not snoozing.
No. I was just prepping something actually. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's a really good walkthrough of the topic tonight. You say there's quite a few bits in there that could turn into their own separate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially these issues of what do you want out of a sound recording of bells, and like you say, the equipment setups that are involved. So do send any questions that you've got using the Q&A interface. We've got a few there already, but it'd be good to get a few more in for Matt to answer. I'm actually going to start with my own,
Okay.
which is, you've mentioned cost a couple of times.
Yeah.
What does any of this cost?
Massively varies. If you're looking at video cameras, you can pick up a GoPro for a couple of £100. Some of the cameras that Dave's got stashed away are multiple thousands, and the high level pro stuff is 5-6 figures sometimes. You're not going to be using that equipment for filming bells, is the point. But you can definitely get a good setup for a few £100s. You don't have to spend thousands and thousands to get anywhere. And it's not always the case that if you spend more you get better quality. That's not always the case. And I think sometimes it is just, are you using the equipment right? If you've got the best camera in the world but don't know how to use it, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah. Steve Farm points out that currently you can't stream using a GoPro. That's a very good point at the moment.
Well, not directly, at least. GoPros do have HDMI outputs, so you could, and in fact I have connected that up to a vision mixer, and then an encoder, and then straight out to YouTube.
Okay. What about the microphone side? And this is potentially a question that I should just answer myself. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think about microphone costs?
What do you think of microphone costs?
Yeah. Because obviously the same applies. There's a huge range. What advice could you give people on microphones?
Those little handheld recorders, which I think are very popular and very good for recording bells, I think you can get hold of them for £100-200, something like that.
Yeah,
seems about right.
Yeah, about 200 for.
Yeah.
We use Zoom H4n on for most of the 12 bell stuff, And in terms of the, if you wanted an external microphone as well, for a long time, I'm just going to press a button. There we go. For a long time, we used these as our preferred microphones, as you can see from a popular internet shopping website. But yeah,
others are available.
others are available, of course, as always. But as you can see, you've got 3 microphones there for the princely sum of £37. Which is excruciatingly affordable. And it goes to the point that Matt was saying that it does make it a little bit easier just to try a few options. If you'd like to have a go.
The microphones we used in the Belfry in Exeter, those were I managed to get hold of some BBC microphones. I think brand new. I think they were pushing on £1,000 each. I think now they're probably worth about £200. But the ones that Dave showed, to be honest, for bells, because they're so loud, you probably won't even notice a difference. But again, give it a go. Just try what you've got.
So we've got a good set of related questions here.
Q&A. I did see these.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll.
You're going to read them out?
Yes, I'll read.
Okay.
So, Philip George asks, can the volume of the bells damage onboard microphones to make them useless for other purposes?
That's a good question. I think the answer to that is no, but possibly theoretically yes, if you had a particularly bad and delicate microphone. Remember, a microphone is effectively a mechanical device. It's a transducer. It's got a plate in it that moves, and the sound pressure coming from a bell could potentially over move the diaphragm or whatever in the microphone and damage it. But I think that's incredibly unlikely for the kit that you'll be using. Maybe some of the very sensitive microphones, but usually those are reference microphones that you find exclusively in studios, and you're not going to be using those because they are multiple thousands of pounds. So I wouldn't worry about breaking your microphone.
Yeah, I'd say more or less the same thing, that most consumer kit that you buy will be drop test tolerant. You can drop it, and of course, if you think about the effective sound pressure of you dropping something, it's inordinately high. In general, it's one of those things. I wouldn't like to offer to be your insurer, but if you did manage to render a microphone useless by putting it somewhere too loud, then I'd be really interested to see. And
if you do break it, do tell us, because it would be very interesting to see what happened.
Yeah, but I think there is the subsequent point about that yes, you can damage things mechanically. So it depends exactly what the device is, but obviously if you put it in an area of the frame where it's vibrating, the frame is vibrating, or it's knocking on the frame, then that can actually do as much damage as the intrinsic sound pressure. So it's
I think you're more likely to physically break your microphone by putting it somewhere where it gets knocked, or drop it, or it falls over, or something like that. And I think you are just on pure sound pressure.
And this also links into a comment that Philip Pratt has made, saying that they had acoustic engineers take readings with calibrated meters at St Mary Redcliffe about 3 years ago, and about 1 meter above the lip of the bells when they were up, they recorded 118 dBs. So
did they really? All right. So my data was completely spot on.
Yeah, so the same as Big Ben. So and that's really interesting, because that gives you another point for comparison, to say that whilst it's loud, it's not out of the realms of things normal consumer equipment could be exposed to. So, for example, if you put it in the middle of a brass band really going for it, then you'd be up at about that level, and you obviously wouldn't expect it to break. And aptly for the 5th of November, as Matt's diagram had, obviously fireworks can be very much louder again. Okay. Steve Farmer comes back to say GoPro 8 does not have HDMI out of the box. You have to purchase the media mod, which is nearly much as the camera. Yes.
Okay, then don't use a GoPro then.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I have to say I'm perpetually confused by the various different flavors of GoPro. And
I'm not up to date. I'm not up to date at all. I think my GoPro is a Hero 3 or something like that. It's absolutely ancient.
Okie doke.
But yeah, I apologize for that.
Let's get on with some more of the questions. Thomas Ashwin asks, I've recently bought a Zoom H2N. Are you happy with what one of those is?
I've never actually seen one, but I think you mentioned that those are the ones that you use.
I've used occasionally, yes. And they've used the side mic and recorded bells last Sunday. How do you know what gain and what type of microphone layout to use? So if you've got the Q&A up, you can just read mid-size, XY, 2-channel, 4-channel, especially for Belfries. What comments have you got on that?
How to know what gain and microphone layout to use? From experience, I think microphone layout is something you can just experiment with. Particularly with the setup we used in Exeter, that up and down method was something that Dave just came up with on the spot. And we thought, let's just give it a go and see what happens. And it turned out it worked quite well. But by no means is that the only way to do it. You could have put microphones all over the place and different sides of the belfry, or just have one facing up, one facing down, one facing the corner. I think the answer is try different ones. And gain is something that you'll have to set when the bells are actually ringing, because you won't be able to preset it, because you won't know how loud the bells are until they're making noise. And usually these things, I don't know, does the H2N have a onboard dB meter, a VU meter, Dave? No, okay.
Don't think so. Who cares? Maybe it does. But yeah, often it's difficult to because it's on the unit itself. You can't easily adjust it whilst the bells are ringing.
So having used the H2N, Dave, what's your thoughts?
I think my main comment is obviously most consumers of sound are going to want 2-channel output. So obviously, if you're going to record more than 2 channels, that's great. But that comes back to well, what are you going to do with it afterwards? And so for 4-channel, you'll almost inevitably have to mix down to get some usable output. And that's great for a project, but if you are wanting it for a live relay or a live stream, I don't think anyone's going to be sort of jockeying the controls whilst you're doing the broadcast. So I think my advice would definitely be to aim for a 2-channel output that you are happy with, and it'll probably take you a bit of placement. I will just caveat that by saying occasionally you just can't get the sound that you want in the belfry, and that you end up having to do some kind of mix. And so that's where you might start requiring a 4-channel type arrangement. And so a typical arrangement for that would be some kind of close-in microphone for the bells as your primary 2 channels, but then some kind of diffuse 2, so they'd be up in the taking reflected sound from within the belfry. Philip Pratt helpfully confirms, yes, the H2N does have VU meters on the channels. Yeah, I think I remember that. It's got a little display on the back.
I think it's going from your point there, Dave, where you said sometimes you just can't get the sound you want. I think this comes to the conclusion that every setup is different. And yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. and you have to think of new and innovative solutions to try and get it to work. And that's part of the, well, I find that's part of the fun, going to all these different places and giving it a go. Everywhere is different.
Yep. Angus asked, have you ever sent a sound recording to Bells on Sunday?
I have not.
I
Or should I have done?
I don't know. Possibly. I have sent a recording to Bells on Sunday, and that was the winning piece of the Richmond Trophy competition in 2017. And that because we used the Richmond Trophy at Cambridge as a bit of a dry run for the 12 bell, and so the winning piece for that was a very nice piece of ringing, and it was suggested that we might want to send it to Bells on Sunday, which we then did.
Mm-hmm.
But the setup for it was very much as Matt has described. So yeah, that was good. And Anand, who was here earlier, unfortunately had to leave to go to another meeting, asked you whether you were part of the crew that filmed the 12 bell competition when it's held in Cambridge in 2018.
I was, and in fact, that's the first 12 bell I got involved with. That's where my involvement began.
Yeah, there we go. Right, well, unless anyone has any further questions, I think we're sort of coming to a close now. I think that was a wonderful walk through basics of the topics. I hope the takeaway message that everyone's got is just give it a go.
Yes.
And you'll be surprised how easy it is to get started, and then you'll be in this cycle of what can I do better next time, as Matt said. Oh, there you go. Nice final question from John Bowler. Said, have you come across any copyright issues in connections with your recordings?
Oh, personally, no, but I know that Dave's an expert on this.
The short answer is for the things that we've discussed. So that is recording pieces of ringing and displaying them, and then live streaming them. The answer is broadly no. Of course, you do have to be very careful of copyright issues. So you need to have the consent of the performers in order to broadcast. You also need the consent of whoever it is who's making the recording. That might sound a bit stupid and obvious, but in some circumstances, the physical making of the recording can become separated. So the short answer is we've not had any issues, but you've got to be careful of it. That's a very, very good point. And of course, if you're going outside, if you're going outside sort of the belfry, into areas where you might see people, or areas where you might have other sounds involved, then yes, you've got to be very careful, not only of copyright but also GDPR type restrictions as well. So again, lots of things to be careful of, but hopefully for your event management, it should just be part of one big flow of it's one of the things you consider along with your health and safety and all the rest of it. But yeah, that's a really good question. And sorry, the oblique reference to other sounds is, of course, if you're if you go into areas where people may be playing music, that's another classic gotcha. And that people are very, very hot on picking up snippets of music in YouTube videos and then putting copyright claims or takedown notices as a result. So that, yeah, good question. Right, well, we've come to an hour. We've managed to
do that.
Yeah.
Waffle.
Right. So just leaves me to say thank you very much indeed for coming along tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the session and found it useful. You'll have certainly have my contact details if you do have any follow-up questions after the event. I don't know if people would find it useful to have a copy of the slides. Would that be possible?
Yeah, if people want them.
Yep. So we'll put a link to get a hold of the slides in a follow-up email tomorrow if you'd like that. And so it just leaves me to say thank you very much, Matt, for preparing this talk. Really,
Pleasure.
and I'll say